Welcome one and all. It's time for an Age of Sigmar tournament report. Possibly the final one of version 3 before we leap with both feet into version 4 in a couple of weeks. So, it's the Stormcast Eternals back on the menu again, featuring Bastian, who had a points reduction, which may have come 2.5 years too late, but he still got it in the end. So that's very exciting, the fact that we're able to use Bastian. And let's have a look at my force here. So, I don't know if there was a strange little glitch in the video then, but I don't know if the video actually started when it told me it did. So my intro might have been sliced off. Wouldn't that have been horrendous for the listeners? Can you imagine missing out on my beautiful voice for those opening few seconds? Anyway, let's go through the tournament format and the list. So it's the pre-Worlds Social. That's because the Age of Sigmar World Championships is taking place this week. And some of the players who are taking part in that, which is in the Netherlands, came over here, and Rob, Mr. Honest Wargamer at the TSN Arena, put on an Age of Sigmar event featuring some of those players. So, Team Australia were taking part in this event, which means that it's going to be some quite high-level play, you would imagine. Anyone playing Age of Sigmar in a World Championship format is definitely going to be fully embedded in the rule set and their army, and probably everyone else's armies, because they have to know what they're facing, they have to have all their tactics and all their patterns down to a fine art, otherwise why would they be at the World Championships? So, I can spoil right now that I do play against more than one Australian at this event, so we'll see how that goes against some top-notch players. And I have just remembered that I haven't made the arrow large. Look at that, it's a tiny, pathetic orange arrow. Let's increase the size of that, shall we? Here we go. So that's a bit more like it, isn't it? So then, my force here. We've got 2,000 points of Stormcast Eternals, 10 models. Not a lot. It is 86 wounds total in this list. And as you can see, not much there. The idea behind this list is that 3rd edition is about to explode. So, why not pick all the stuff that I think is really cool that I've played over the last few years for Age of Sigmar? So, we've got Bastian in there because I think he is the coolest dude, possibly in the whole game. And he's a little bit cheaper now, so marginally more competitive. We've got Krondis, the big coolest dragon in my opinion, with some very nice magic spells. We've got the Star Drake, who combos in with Krondis nicely because you can take the Master of the Celestial Menagerie and get -1 to wound in combat against both of them, which is really cool. And lots of Dracoths, because Hammers of Sigmar, 3 units as battle line, and also the Lord Relictor with translocation, because you can't leave home without that. That would be a very silly idea for the Stormcast Eternals indeed. And you'll notice that 2 of them are actually concussors, which is a rare sight. Not just these days, but maybe ever during Age of Sigmar. I built them that way during 1st edition, and then during 3rd edition I finally magnetised the arms so I could run them as something else, because concussors have never been particularly good. The reason they're in there is because they are cheaper than Fulminators, and I'm dead on 2,000 points. So I couldn't downgrade any of the other units enough to fit within the points. Even if I reduced the Lord Relictor into a Knight Relictor, that doesn't free up enough points to turn them into Fulminators. So we've got 2 concussors and 2 units of 2 Tempestors. So no Liberators, so I'm not going to be bringing any Liberators back to life, which, as you may remember, is usually very exciting for the Stormcast. That moment when 5 useless Liberators return from the heavens. It's not really that exciting. So, because it's so scorching today, I have actually got a fan blasting me as we proceed through this video. So, if that is audible to anybody, then let me know if the fan is loud in any way, and I can turn it down or change the angle of it, if that's preferable for people. So, let me tell you exactly what upgrades I've got on my units here. So, we have the Star Drake, first of all, which I've given Quicksilver to. So, once per game, it can strike first in combat. The idea being that if I'm the one getting charged by the enemy, one of my big monsters gets to fight before they do. And if I am committing to charges with multiple units, like the two big monsters in particular, on my own turn, then I can strike with both of them before the enemy can hit back. So just once per game, so we'll see how useful that is, but it usually comes up every game. Then, as I mentioned, Master of the Celestial Menagerie, so -1 to wound against all my behemoths in combat, so that's going to be very useful until the Star Drake dies. I haven't brought any bodyguards for them, so they're not going to have any ward saves. I've given the Star Drake Celestial Instincts mount trait as well, so it can retreat and then shoot, or retreat and then charge, which is very handy. The Star Drake does have a good shooting attack, and being able to retreat and charge obviously allows you to avoid being bogged down in combat with a unit you don't want to be fighting. We have the Warhammer Orchard in the chat. It'll be fun to see this list in AoS 4th in terms of points cost. You could do a comparison. Yes, that'll be interesting. And hopefully you can run a list kind of like this, because I think this is some of the coolest stuff that Stormcast have. I do think Grandhammer Annihilators are very cool as well, for the record, so hopefully they're also useful. But the two dragons, I kind of hope that they don't have such a high quality synergy between the dragons, and that they just make them cheaper. Because I feel like Krondys, on his own in the list, is extremely vulnerable. And having the Star Drake in there to put -1 to wound against him, I think is very important at making him worth his cost. And they're both 480 points, so that's half your points on 2 models. So I would like to be able to just run 1 dragon, but I think you get so much more value running multiples of them because of that command trait. So I would just get rid of that entirely and make them a lot cheaper. I think that would be fun, because then you can have more stuff in the list. AoS 4, it could well be Hero Hammer, potentially. We've seen a lot of the rules, but we haven't seen all the specific unit rules and the points costs yet. So that remains to be seen. I'm also holding off on watching the Honest Wargamer 2-hour quick guide to all the Age of Sigmar 4 rules, because obviously I was playing in this 3rd edition event. I didn't want the 4th edition rules to be totally embedded in my mind until I've played this and got it out of the way. But hopefully things get cheaper. Hopefully Bastian can be nice and cheap, so he's more usable in the next edition. That would be my #1 wish. So, that is my list. For my Holy Command, I've gone for Steadfast March, so once per game a unit can run and charge. So for example, if it's Krondys and I auto-run, then he could move 20 inches and then charge, which is a significant threat range, and Bastian could then move 12 inches and charge, which is very scary as well for the enemy. And I've taken Overshadow as my grand strategy, which means I have to keep some of the Dracoths alive and kill all the enemy battle line. So I'm not too confident in doing that. But in general, I think I've got the tools to deal with a lot of things in this list. Despite the lack of models, if I come up against big horde armies, then I think Krondys and the Star Drake are decent at dealing with that. Krondys in particular, because he gets an attack per enemy model within 3 inches with the tail. So if he gets surrounded by 1,000,000 skeletons or something, he's going to have 1,000,000 attacks at them. The Star Drake is useful because it can just eat a few models before the combat starts, almost. After he piles it, I think it is, then he can just eat 3 models. So against anything that has 4 wounds or less, that's very, very scary. So things like trolls, or anything with 2 wounds or less, you think it's very likely he's going to eat 3 of them. So that's useful there. Bastian is also pretty good against hordes of filth, hordes of useless units, because every time he kills a model, he gets all his wounds back at the end of combat. So he can tie up massive units if they're not very hitty. So, other than that, the Tempesters are also good at thinning out ranks. They get a lot of shots with their crossbows. So overall, I think I'm decently equipped to deal with hordes. To deal with elite stuff, the mortal wound output isn't bad. I've got the breath attacks from all the Dracoths and from Krondys, which is powerful as well. That can potentially do D6 mortals. And then I've got mortal wounds from Bastian, raining down his lightning in the hero phase. So for example, King Brod be throwing 40 dice at him to try and do some mortal wounds. And who else has got mortal wound output? The Concussors do mortal wounds in combat as well with their hammers. So there's decent mortal wound output. So I think it's not a bad list, even though I've chosen it to be quite gimmicky. And I've just put all the cool stuff in. I think it might work quite well. Obviously, it lacks bodies for objectives, so I'm not going to be able to stop the enemy scoring that well. The first mission is the Frigid Zephyr. And I'm up against the filthy Verminous Skaven. And I can tell you that this is one of the Australian players who is travelling around the world on tour, ready to go to the Age of Sigmar World Championships. So this should be a nightmarish list to deal with, in theory, and we'll find out if that is the case. So the Frigid Zephyr, by the way, there is a ferocious squall in effect, which means no flying, which is bad for me, no long-range shooting early on in the game, which is potentially bad, but not that big of a deal for me. I've only got two attacks that are affected by that. Crondis and the Stardrake, their ranged attacks need a bit more range and a bit more visibility than that, so they'll have to get closer. And 3 objectives that are scored in the standard way. You can see that the Skaven have got 3 gnaw holes, which are looking a bit lava infested, so I wouldn't want to be heading down there if I was a rat. But there they are. There's one at the back there, one there, and one there. So the rats can travel between them, but if you're standing right next to the hole, then they will struggle to pass through it. So really, they want to be jumping out in an open area where you haven't got models. So I've got Bastian parked right by one of them, because I think if some clan rats come out, he can deal with them quite handily. And I'll look at the Skaven list here. So the grand strategy is Arch Corruptors of the Mortal Realms. Now, I'm expected to remember what these things do, and quite often I don't remember what they do. The Triumph is Bloodthirsty. My list is exactly 2,000 points, so I'm usually going to be giving away a Triumph. So that's a reroll of a charge. And I do remember some of the abilities for this Skaven army, actually. So there's a Vermin Lord Warbringer. Let me get to the close-ups of those. So there's a Warbringer and a... The other one... What's the other one called? Warbringer and Warp Seer. So those are the 2 Vermin Lords that are quite scary. They're over 300 points each. There is a Grey Seer, who is somewhere. I can't be expected to pick out characters in all these rats, really, can I? There's a Grey Seer, there's a Plague Priest on Plague Furnace, which is obviously right there. There are 2 regular Plague Priests as well, who are in this rabble of rats somewhere. So, into battle line, there are 2 lots of 40 clan rats, who are, I think there's a big blob there, and there's a big blob there. And then 15 Plague Censer Bearers, which are here. Hiding behind the clan rats because they don't want to be shot. Because the Plague Censer Bearers are very potent in combat, so they don't want to be killed before they get a chance to do that. That's a 300 point unit of Censer Bearers there, there's 15 of them. And they are in the Wizard Finders battalion, so they're going to be very good against Crondis, along with one of the units of clan rats. And there's a Plague Priest in there as well. And then there's also a Warlord battalion. So it is significantly more drops than I am, because I've gone for a Battle Regiment and then the Stardrake outside of the Battle Regiment, so only 2 drops. So usually I'm going to be getting the choice of going first or second, which is rare for Stormcast, because usually, with the kind of lists I run, I like to take the Warlord Battalion, so that I can have 2 Holy Commands, so that I can bring a unit of Liberators back to life, and I can also shoot long strikes in the hero phase, but neither of those units are an issue here, so I've just gone 2 drops. Perfidy is surprisingly hyped for AoS 4. It should be very exciting times. A lot of people have been holding off on playing Age of Sigmar or buying new stuff and just waiting for version 4 to come along. So it's nice to get back playing this game again. The last event was a few months ago, I think, and I haven't played any games since, because obviously waiting for version 4 to come along. So, the rats. What are some of the abilities they have that I can remember? So, when they make a charge roll, then if the player likes the charge roll, then every other unit in the army can then mimic that charge roll. So if the first charge roll is like 10 or 11 or 12, then you can just say, okay, every other unit in the army makes a 12-inch charge, which seems very powerful. The other thing that's very powerful is that the Vermin Lords, on a 3+, they can pass off wounds they suffer onto clan rats, which is extremely powerful, because you're adding a huge amount of wounds You're adding 2/3 the wounds, basically, onto a Vermin Lord. And... yes, so 2/3 of the wounds that are applied to a Vermin Lord are then being applied to the Clan Rats, is what I should say. And the Clan Rats, it's not like they're going to stay dead either, because they just come back because they feel like it at the end of combat. And of course they can rally, and there's millions of them, so if you've lost like 30, you're going to be throwing a lot of rally dice, and then I think you're still capped at 10 wounds you can bring back through rally, but you'd still be very happy with that. So they constantly come back to life, and all the wounds are being passed on to them. So you can see how that's a killer combo, because damaging the Vermin Lords is going to be very difficult indeed. And even getting to them is going to be difficult through this big wall of Clan Rats, so you're going to have to commit and kill them. And they've got the Plague Censer Bearers hiding in there, who are one of the units in this game where I feel like, looking at the Stormcast War Scroll, when I see 3s on hits and wounds, or maybe some 2s, I think, yeah, that's a good stat line for a unit. And then when a unit like Plague Censer Bearers charge into you, and the opponent says, okay, so I've got 6 attacks each, and I'm on 2s and 2s, and I'm at Rend 3, and it's doing multiple damage each. Now, I don't know whether all those things apply to the Plague Censer Bearers, but it feels like every other faction has at least a unit that they can get synergies off with their heroes, and maybe just some other units being nearby, that they can get obscene stats that Stormcast could only dream of, in terms of number of attacks, and being on 2s and 2s. So, very powerful units out there, but you do have to pay for the synergies. Stormcast don't really have that, they're a bit more straightforward. Usually Stormcast units can operate independently without worrying about being near a particular hero. The synergies you have, there are defensive ones, in that you can take the Praetors as bodyguards, or you can bring Gardas to give people a ward save. But otherwise, it's mostly just the heroes issuing commands. There aren't a lot of other synergies. They'll often apply a buff, but it's kind of a one-time thing. They issue it and then they go away. You don't have a lot of auras of effect in Stormcast. So, how concerned am I about this game? Extremely. I don't think I'm going to be able to get through all this stuff to get to the juicy things at the back, because even though I can do a lot of wounds to these hordes, they're going to keep coming back. And while I'm fighting the hordes, that means I'm not fighting the big scary stuff that can then attack me. So, not very confident at all. Especially with the Squall, which means I can't target the units at the back that are hiding behind the Clan Rats, which is very sad indeed. So, cinematic over the wing cam there. So, I'm choosing to let my opponent go first, which usually means giving up magical dominance, but I'm not too bothered about that, because I don't want to be doubled, and I want to get double turns when I drop down my Dracoths, because if we go back, you'll see I've got all 3 units of Dracoths in the sky, and I would rather them drop down when I've got a chance for another turn after it, so they can come down, shoot, try a charge, then if it doesn't work, I can hope to get the next turn, shoot again, then charge, and then kick loads of butt that way. Bastian by the Gnaw-hole, 2 big dragons, and the Lord Relictor ready to teleport one of them if I need to. And so Bastian's just trying to shut down that single Gnaw-hole, by the way. That's his entire goal. So in terms of scoring the objectives, it's going to be difficult with all these Clan Rats until I thin them down, and that could take a while. So turn 1, and my opponent goes for magical dominance, and starts buffing up the Clan Rats. So there are all kinds of buffs that can go onto these units. There's like fight on death and extra attacks and all kinds of horrible things. You can see that there's something crudely drawn on a piece of paper there, which I think is +1 save to the Plague Furnace, Plague Priest. +1 something to the Vermin Lord there. And a 6+ ward on the Clan Rats, which is just... on a unit that big, it's very useful, because you need to be mowing through dozens of them each turn, really. So if any are making a save of any kind, then it's going to just keep the unit around longer and be very annoying. And +1 attack. So they're buffed up to the eyeballs, and the Clan Rats start spreading out. And the Vermin Lords and the Plague Furnace are embedded behind here. So I can start dropping units down over there, perhaps, to the left, which is the only way of getting to the Vermin Lords, but even then they're passing wounds off onto the Clan Rats constantly. Now, there is going to be some discrepancies with how the terrain is played at this event, because some of the players, particularly the players who are going to the World Championships, were preferring to play on the terrain maps from the World Championships, and some of them preferred to play on the TSN map. Some of them wanted to play the hills as hills that you can walk on, some wanted to play them as impassable, some wanted to play these big blocking bits of terrain as fully blocking all the way up to the base. Some people preferred walking on them, so I was just happy to go along with whatever the opponent wanted. So I'll point out as it happens which terrain rules are in effect, and also in at least 1 or 2 of the games we use the mysterious terrain dice as well. So terrain has mysterious effects. So 5 points for my opponent in the first round, and I go for Intimidate the Invaders, so I have to pile out of my deployment zone, which isn't drastically difficult. So you can see that I've immediately dropped down some Tempesters, and I'm just trying to thin out the ranks immediately, get a load of clan rats killed. Bastian's moved on to this objective, and the Lord Relictor has gone up behind him, so I can get ready to teleport Bastian when needed. The Stardrake has towed onto this objective here, and the Concussors drop in. They do a bit of shooting, and then they charge into this Plague Priest. Now, with Skaven, you have to attack them quickly before they can scuttle away. So I went in with their attacks first, but somehow the Plague Priest survived, which is very annoying. And this is before I knew how good the Plague Censer Bearers are, by the way. So otherwise I would have avoided bringing them into combat entirely, because it's going to be a bad time now. We've got Clan Rats surrounding Krondys, which is okay, because he has 1,000,000 attacks against Clan Rats, and he clears out a load of them. But there's still some alive over here. And the Concussors get absolutely destroyed by the Plague Censer Bearers. So yeah, that was just a bad time for them entirely. They didn't even kill the Plague Priest they were chasing after. And bad news all round there. So I've got some points on the board though. So 5 points, Intimidate the Invaders, and score objectives. The state of play is, if I get the double, I do have the opportunity to go in and kill some more stuff. And I also have some units of Clan Rats that have 10 or more models, so I can use the Draconith Destruction battle tactic, which isn't always going to come up. Sometimes you'll be facing armies that don't have any units with 10 or more models, so that's just invalid. So let's see who's getting first crack in round 2. Oh, you can see Bastian over there came on, but he failed his charge. He teleported over there in this round. So turn 2, and I take the turn, and I go for the Draconith Destruction, but Bastian failed his charge when he was teleported over there by the Lord Relictor. I've got my Stardrake and Krondys into the Clan Rats, and the Tempesters into the other Clan Rats. But as you can see, quite a lot of Clan Rats left alive. I failed to kill the units. So these 2 dragons just had some woeful attack rounds here, which was very sad. So I wasn't able to kill the Clan Rats. And that happens sometimes when you're dealing with big monsters that have a limited number of high damage attacks. It doesn't take many misses for it to be a complete disaster. So, failed battle tactic. And 3 points in the bag. And to the next round, my opponent goes for Led into the Maelstrom, so charge a hero and a battle line unit, and one of them still has to be in combat at the end. I Finest Hour the Stardrake, because I have a feeling it's going to come under attack. And the Stardrake is the one that keeps the -1 to wound on both of these active. So ideally, if you're planning to kill them in close combat, you want to kill the Stardrake first. So that's why I've gone for Finest Hour there, because there are 2 Vermin Lords around that would be very scary. You can see that Celestial Blades was cast onto Krondys last turn as well, so that's still hanging out there. Then we're going to see some moving of the Skaven. So lots of buffs dropped on the Plague Censer Bearers, and they're going to try and charge between here into the dragons. And so what they want to do is, when they charge, they don't want to be within 3 inches of Krondys, because then you could pick one of them and say, hey, you guys, you're -1 to hit this turn. So the units that he cares about, he's going to keep them out of 3 of Krondys until combat's started, which is a good idea. You also keep them out of the way of, obviously, Monstrous Rampage from Krondys as well. So, setting up for the charges. And charges are made. We've got the Plague Furnace and the Vermin Lord into Crondis. Got another Vermin Lord between the two. And we've got the Plague Censer Bearers into the Star Drake. However, because I have my Quicksilver, the Star Drake is able to go first. And it kills a ton of the Plague Censer Bearers before they get to strike, which is great. So really good performance there from the Star Drake. I think they fail their ward saves as well that they had. So they end up losing about 7, or it might be more than that actually, because I think there's only 3 left. And there was 15 at the start. So yeah, it probably killed more than 10, which is really good. But they do have Fight on Death. And with that, they're able to do some significant wounds. And with the assistance of the Vermin Lords, can then kill Crondis, which is very sad. And yeah, you can see that Star Drake is actually the one that gets hit by the remaining Plague Censer Bearers as well. So he's down to 2 wounds. So loads of wounds dished out on the dragons this turn. Plague Censer Bearers fighting on death, and then the ones that were remaining fighting again. Very, very dangerous. So I can only imagine if I didn't have Quicksilver and they got to strike first, and then I killed them, and then they got to fight on death, that would have been nightmarish. So it would have been best, probably, if you're in that situation, to not kill them. So they only have to fight once. I think that would be valid. So, Clan Rats have been hanging out with all these Tempesters here as well. You can see that the Plague Furnace has piled in towards the Tempesters and one of them's died. So the filthy Verminous Skaven get up to 5 points there for that round. And the Skaven get the first go in the next round. So the double for the Skaven. I turned Bastian into an Unbinder because I've got nothing to shut down magic now with Crondis dead. And the Star Drake is killed, as you'd expect, with only 2 wounds left. And another Tempester goes down from that unit, from magic or shooting there. And another one. So we're down to just a Tempester, Bastian, and the Lord Relictor. So it's obviously game over at this point. And I'll just see if I can score some points. So the Vermin Lord is going to charge Bastian. Another Vermin Lord into the Lord Relictor, who tried to redeploy away. Vermin Lord kills Bastian quite easily. The Tempester dies, and the Lord Relictor dies. So end of the game. I've only played 2 turns, and everything's dead. So as you can see, very, very powerful Skaven. And I felt like I was unprepared for most of what they could do. I haven't played against them an obscene number of times, and obviously not every build is going to have the same abilities. But the things that mostly caught me out were when one unit does something, then every other unit in the army can mimic it. So things like a really high charge, then all the other units can do it. Or I think also piling in was a thing they could do as well. So I think lots of piling in was happening. May have been extra big pile-ins. So there's a lot of stuff I wasn't prepared for against the Skaven here. And the power of the Plague Censer Bearers was definitely one of them. Looking back now, if I was doing this matchup again with my knowledge, I would probably hold off and give up points early on and wait until the squall had dissipated and then try and shoot down the Plague Censer Bearers, because I think they're the big threat in the list. And maybe that would have gone a bit better, perhaps. So yeah, I didn't kill too much, just a load of Clan Rats. And there's the final score. So not much at all, only got to play 2 turns for the Stormcast, and everything's dead. So moving into the second round. No reward without risk. So we have 5 victory points, or 5 objectives available to score on. The scoring is fairly standard, but wizards explode when they die. So Crondis can obviously explode in a vast area. And what am I up against? I'm up against the might of the Sylvaneth. So let me go into the Best Coast Pairings app and look at that list for the Sylvaneth. So this is another one of the Australian players. So the Australian Worlds team are getting some good practice against me, obviously the legend of the Stormcast here. So let's see what we've got in this list. We have got the Lady of Vines, who is there, who is a decent all-rounder, I would say. decent spellcaster and pretty good at fighting as well. And 230 points. There is Belthanos, First Thorn of Kurnoth, right there, who is fast and pretty good fighter, I think, as well, 360 points. There's an Arch Revenant in here somewhere. And in the battle line, there are 6 Kurnoth Hunters with scythes. There are 2 lots of 3 Kurnoth Hunters with great bows. And 5 Tree Revenants in the Wild Woods there. And then, other units, there are 3 Revenant Seekers, which are there. And an endless spell, the Spiked Swarm Hive, which gives bonuses, like, I think it gives plus to charge for units that are near it, which is handy. And it's a battle regiment, 2 drops, same as me, so the roll-off to put a drop down first is going to be important. So, when I look at this list, having played against Sylvaneth quite a few times, the one thing I always look to kill is this unit, which is the Revenant Seekers. The reason is, anything where there's no dice roll involved is just very powerful in this game. So just being near a unit and bringing a model back to life, regardless of if it's in combat, regardless of what else is going on, if these guys are just near a unit, they bring a model back to life, which is obscenely powerful without even a dice roll attached to it. It's not even on a 2-up, just automatic. So I'm going to be honing in on trying to kill this unit before I go big on the other units. If I'm going to kill anything else, I have to go big and kill every model. So I would like to ideally just kill this unit first. So we'll see if I get the opportunity to do that, because obviously they're more of a support unit, so maybe they won't be out on the front lines. And they cost, let's see, how much are they? 220 points, and they're not amazing at fighting compared to like these guys, Kurnoth Hunters. So I think just that bringing models back ability is really powerful, which obviously you can combine with rallying. So the way this army works as well, another thing I've learned about Sylvaneth is when you let them fight on their own turn in particular, they can just bounce out of combat to an overgrown piece of terrain or the wildwood. So if they charge you and then punch you, they can just disappear afterwards. So you don't even get a chance to hit them back. So they're very precision, hit and run army. So I'm going to be aware of all these things, and we'll see if I can put up an effective counter to it. There is my layout. So Stardrake and Krondys next to each other, so if anything wants to attack them, may end up tagging both of them. So at the very least, if you want to attack one of them, I think the Stardrake is the easier one to just attack one, because it's got more space to attack around it. Krondys, if you want to attack him, you're possibly more likely to bring the Stardrake in. If you end up attacking both of them, then obviously you're open to 2 monstrous rampages, which happens before combat, so even if you attack and then bounce away, still not a good time. Also, the Stardrake has the Quicksilver, so it can go first in combat. So if you attack the Stardrake, then before you get a chance to bounce away, it can hit you and maybe even eat you. Because I think the Kurnoth Hunters have 5 wounds each. I think it's 4 or 5. So if I roll well, then I can just eat them. We've got Bastian up here on an objective. We've got the Lord Relictor ready to translocate any of these 3 units, should the need arise. And what are my thoughts on confidence levels? Well, obviously, this is one of the Australian players, so should be a top-notch player, should have a good list, should have the ability to kick butt, so I'm not confident of winning, but I think I know pretty much what I'm up against, so I think I can do better than the first game. Targeting the units that I think are the most dangerous, such as the Seekers, the most dangerous for my plan anyway. And my grand strategy, I would have to kill all the Kurnoth Hunters, which is going to be difficult because they can hit and run and they can hide. That's going to be tricky. So we're also using mysterious terrain as well, so there'll be a couple of arcane or mystical buildings around there, but it doesn't come up that much particularly. So I give away turn 1 after winning the ability to choose that with deployment. And my opponent is obviously going to go for Magical Dominance first. It's a nice easy one at the start of the game if you've got a caster out of range of my only unbinder, who is Krondys. So there's going to be a spell that's going off quite easily, and then there's going to be units bouncing around. I actually quite like these vertical tokens, so you have a large space for the text, but it's not taking up much space on the table. So I like these a lot, actually. Kind of thing I might look to invest in the future. It reminds me a bit of the flagpoles that I have on my Mega Gargant bases, so I can attach a little magnetized, a little fence. It's like a fence post, and then I've got a little sign that I magnetize on it to tell people which Mega Gargant it is. It reminds me of that a little bit. But very nice tokenage. And this is a very nice army as well. I don't think it was my opponent's actual army. I think it was borrowed from somebody else, but very nice. So we've got some tree revenants appearing there. Also, there can be potential of some dryads being summoned during the game as well. I should mention that. So the Kurnoth Hunters decide they're going to make a turn 1, try and make an alpha strike into the Stardrake, which is obviously risky because it can strike first, but you'd hope to only lose maybe 1 to the Stardrake's attacks, and then you've still got 5 hitting it, so you have a chance of killing it with that. And because it's turn 1, I don't really feel like I need to Finest Hour either of my dragons, because they're perfectly healthy and they're not already locked in with dangerous enemies, so there is the chance that they can fail the charge even, so I don't want to waste a Finest Hour. So there are the dryads that have been summoned into the centre, so they're kind of screening off the stuff I really want to kill, which is that unit here, but the dryads aren't very good, so I think I can punch through that screen and get to them. So I'm kind of glad the Seekers are not further away, because I think they're in position for me to strike at them, so that's what I immediately was eyeing up there. Obviously I can't do much about this. We'll just see how the charge goes. So, there is some shooting that dishes out some wounds onto Stardrake. Oh, by the way, you'll notice that some of my units have a green marker next to them, which means that the Sylvaneth are going to be +1 to hit against them. So it's both the Dragons and the Lord Relictor. There was some debate over my opponent whether to choose Bastian or the Lord Relictor, and I feel like Bastian is the kind of guy that's just best avoided anyway, because he's not very fast, and he relies on fighting you to get his wounds back. So if you just avoid him and shoot him, maybe you're not going to be fighting him that much, so maybe you don't care about having +1 to hit against him. So I think that may have been coming into the logic there. So the Kurnoths do successfully make the charge into the wounded Stardrake, which is obviously very scary, so the Stardrake is going to have to get some work done by going first now. And it kills 2, which is really good. It doesn't kill any with its eating attack. It would have been nice to just eat one of them as well. But then it kills 2 because they aren't very good at making their saves right now. I used all out attack as well. So, after combat it's down to 7 wounds and they teleport away. So, that turn 1 alpha strike did not pay off for the Kurnoth Hunters. So, they are wounded and retreating to lick their wounds. Or whatever they would do. Do they have tongues, or do they just have leaves and branches? Maybe they have like a leafy green tongue that they could lick their wounds with. So, 5-point score for Magical Dominance and taking all the objectives. I go for Magical Dominance as well. And I don't think my opponent moved into range to dispel my spells, which is why I felt it was a good time to use that. So, I bring down the Concussors next to these Kurnoth Hunters with bows, because I think they're a good way of taking them out. So I can drop down, do some mortal wounds to them maybe, and then charge them. All 4 Tempesters, so both units drop down next to these Kurnoth Hunters with bows, and shoot down 2 of them, which is really good. And Bastian... Okay. Bastian steams into the Dryads, and whomps them to death. Krondys steams in as well, and because the Dryads are then dead, he can pile in and attack the Seekers and kills them all. And let me go back to the wide shot so you can see what the Stardrake's doing as well. So where are we? So I think the Stardrake also went in. So then at the end of combat you can see the Stardrake and Krondys have cleared out a load of stuff now. And I would say that's a very successful turn. The Concussors didn't make their charge, which would have been great, and it would have been even greater if I could have killed off that last guy there as well. Because then maybe I could have cleared out everything, and that would have been a really good situation to be in. As it stands, it's not great. And it's okay, though. It's looking quite good, I think. I'm feeling good about it. Could have been better, but also could be looking worse at this stage. I'm glad that this Kurnoth Hunter won't be able to just gain a model back from the Seekers, so I'm glad I've got them taken out. So my plan to kill them has paid off. And you can see the Stardrake has got some wounds back as well. I was able to heroic recover. And Mystic Shield was put on the Stardrake. You can see I used all-out defense on the Stardrake as well when it was attacked. So, let's see who gets first crack at round 2. Because if it's me, I think this is horrifically bad for the Sylvaneth, this situation. It could just be a case of if I get the next turn, I win. Because what are they going to do? I'm going to be dominating the objectives. They're not far enough out to be turning things into wildwoods that are far away. I'm going to kill this guy. I'm going to kill them. I may even get Krondys and a Stardrake possibly into combat with the heroes. Could kill them. We could just be down to 4 Kurnoth Hunters if I go next, if I roll well. So I think very critical that the Sylvaneth get the next turn for them. For me, if the Sylvaneth get it, it's not the end of the world, because I've got another chance for a double later on. I may end up losing a dragon, so it's not going to be as devastating when I do get the next double. But I think it's absolutely critical for the Sylvaneth they get the next turn. And they do. So, we've got Belphanos and the last Kurnoth with the bow from this unit are going after the Tempesters. And everyone else starts shooting away. Krondys takes a couple of wounds. And the 4 Kurnoth Hunters with scythes then teleport to the Wildwoods over here and make a 9-inch charge into the Tempesters. Take a couple of wounds from the Unleash Hell. And that is the... which hero is that? That would be the Arch Revenant, I think, there. So all the Tempesters are dead, so that's sad. So you can see how that's a big swing, because if I'd got the next turn, they would certainly not have been dead, and they would have definitely killed him, and maybe even more than that. So, games do hinge on that double turn quite a lot. So Bastian's in a good position still, though. He can finish off that unit, and I'm in a prime position to strike at the Lady of Vines and the Kurnoth Hunters there. So it's definitely not the end of the world, and you can't rely on getting a double. It just would have been absolutely devastating for the Sylvaneth had it happened. So, 4 points scored there because they can't take too many objectives off me right now. So, turn 2 for me, and I go for Led into the Maelstrom. So charge a battle line unit and a hero into combat. So one of them is going to be Bastian, who's upside down right now, but he charged in and killed the final Kurnoth Hunter. And Lord Relictor just teleports away to hide behind this terrain. And I get Krondys into combat, I get the Concussors into combat, and the Stardrake. And for some reason, I only managed to kill 1 Kurnoth with a bow, with all those guys. And I do some wounds to the Lady of Vines as well. But that's disappointing, not killing off that unit with all this meat in there. So, here you go. I do get them down to 1 at the end. So, still looking okay, and I pick up 5 points again, because I'm still holding the objectives. And into round 3. So, again, my opponent gets the go. So, let's see if I got the double now, what would happen? So, the Lady of Vines would 100% die. This guy would die. The Stardrake can retreat and shoot, or retreat and charge, so I'd probably retreat away from this surviving Kurnoth, and maybe go and shoot at somebody. Maybe shoot at the Kurnoths there, so Bastian could charge in and have a go at them. That would be fun. That would be an exciting battle, actually, between those, because they've got some nice attack profile. So I could use Krondys. You can see he's already used his ability to give them -1 rend in this turn, in case Bastian charged them. Because I was hoping I could kill the final Kurnoth with shooting and then Bastian charge into them. So reducing their rend. I wasn't sure whether to reduce their rend or their number of attacks. No, I think it's -1 to hit you can put on them in close combat. Or -1 rend. And I decided -1 rend was good in this situation because Bastian's got a good save and a ward save. So just doubling up on that really. So if I got the double, Bastian would get in there. Maybe kill them with the assist from some shooting and some debuff spells. That would be nice. And these two would certainly die, I think. So it'd still be looking very good. But nope, it goes to the Sylvaneth. So I Finest Hour Krondys because he's in peril of fighting because the Lady of Vines is going to be able to go first in combat there. And these guys managed to rally back another Kurnoth Hunter, which makes them a bit more scary, around Bastian. And led into the Maelstrom is chosen, which is the same one I just chose. Hero and a battle line unit make a charge. Somebody's still in combat at the end. So, one of these Kurnoths is brought back to life as well, which isn't a rally because they're within range of my units. It's an ability, which I think is the Lady of Vines did it. The Kurnoths are moving past Bastian, and when they did that, I redeployed him here because he was here, and I thought there's a big flying guy there. What could I do with a redeploy from Bastian? Because I had to ask if he flies first, because if he couldn't fly, I was going to redeploy and kind of box him in, so he couldn't really go anywhere that he wanted. But because he can fly, I redeploy this way. Hopefully, he doesn't have the range now to fly over the top of Bastian and charge the Stardrake, and he now has to engage maybe Krondis, who is on Finest Hour. That's the plan. So we'll see if that pays off, and it kind of does because he doesn't have enough movement to get over Bastian now, so he has to go after Krondis potentially there. So let's see how this goes. The Kurnoth with bows just zap away from combat. I think they do it at the end of the movement phase actually, they just zap out of here because they don't want to die. So the Stardrake isn't in combat anymore. And I put all that defense on it because it's being shot, I believe, there. Well, Belthanos makes an obscenely high charge roll and decides he's going to just bypass Krondis and go for the Stardrake. And so do the Kurnoth Hunters, so they've got a good chance of killing it now. But they have got -1 rend on them still, so that could be crucial here. And you're also -1 to wound against my Behemoths as well, because of the Master of the Celestial Menagerie. Lady of Vines and Krondis are duking it out a bit there, so they take some more wounds. The Stardrake, at the end of all that fighting, is down to 2 wounds remaining, but still alive, which is very important because he can retreat. Krondis also still alive, and you would think it was a great idea for the Stardrake to retreat, except he is actually dead now. But so is Belthanos. So the Stardrake was killed by, I'm not sure if it was an ability at the end of combat or whether it was Belthanos' attacks, and the first lot was from the Kurnoths, and then I was able to murder Belthanos. So that may have been a combination of the Stardrake exploding and maybe Krondis did something as well, but they're both dead now. Okay, I just totally lied. He's not dead yet. He is on 5 wounds, and he teleports away after fighting. So that's why the Lady of Vines and Krondis are fighting. So if he doesn't die at any point now, that'll be a nice memory lapse. So the Stardrake is dead though. Krondis still very much alive. And so no, I don't think wizards have died yet. So even though I can reveal that when wizards do die in this game, we do totally forget that that is the battle plan and don't remember to do the explosion. So I think to make people remember that, what we really need to do on this battle plan, it might be going away entirely, I don't even remember if it's there anymore, but if any mission is like this again, where a specific unit type explodes on death, maybe they should have some kind of token attached to them to help you remember. That would be my top tip. So, okay, it gets complicated now, because the pictures, as you could see, took Belthanos out of combat, and then these guys were still in combat. However, that would have failed the battle tactic. So I said to my opponent, hey, are you sure you want to do that? Because I think they're a unit that charged, so they need to still be in combat. Belthanos didn't charge, so he can be out of combat. It doesn't matter about him. So then my opponent's like, oh yes, forgot about that. So let's just put them back in. Or the other way around, should I say. So they would have been locked out of combat because they weren't touching the Stardrake, and Belthanos was already in. I think. Or am I just totally lying here? Yes, because Belthanos is the one that made a charge as well. They both charged, but if Belthanos teleported away, then they would both be out of combat. Yes, so that is correct. So that would have failed the battle tactic, and Belthanos is there. So then they just do a switcheroo and they bounce away instead. So the battle tactic is completed. However, not a lot of objectives held yet, so only 4 points. So my turn 3, I go for Intimidate the Invaders, which is going to be easy. I've teleported the Lord Relictor over here to my other units in case I want to teleport one of them later. Rondes is down to his final wound, so he's in big danger now. But Bastian and the Concussors are steaming in to try and murder Belthanos now. And they do. So, very good to kill Belthanos there, and just about hanging on to Krondis with 1 wound left, which is a big, big deal. And I pick up another 5, so I'm in the lead. I'm probably not going to get my grand strategy, because I would have to kill all the remaining Kurnoths, and they're really far away. So, on to round 4, who's going to get it? And finally I do get the double. Now, it comes a bit too late for me, I think. I could have done with it earlier, when I could have completely steamrolled the Sylvaneth. But as it stands, I can try and kill this general. And it's my opponent's grand strategy to keep that guy alive, which is the... let's see. Keep forgetting what that one's called. It is the Arch Revenant. So if the Arch Revenant dies, it's a failed grand strategy for my opponent. So I go in there, try and kill him, and fail. And you can see I picked Surround and Destroy here as my battle tactic. And I think... did I fail it? I think I'm holding objectives. So I think, yeah, I think I just failed it. Because... let's see. There's not enough pictures here to give me a clear view of what's going on exactly. But I think I either... let's see. Maybe it was because I didn't kill this guy. Okay, I remember now. Because I was running out of battle tactics and I thought, that's a doable one. But I have to make a long charge with Krondis and bounce over the top of him. So that was the plan. Unfortunately, I rolled woefully low on the charge. I think I even re-rolled it as well to try and get higher. But I did get in there and try to kill him. But couldn't kill him, sadly. So I failed the battle tactic, so I only got 3 points. My opponent then chooses the same thing. And, well, what's going on here, you may ask? So, the enemy general is dead. Because Krondis was killed, and the explosion of Krondis's wounds, with the Stormcast lightning zapping him back up to the heavens, was enough to kill the Arch Revenant. So, it was... oh, one thing that should be pointed out as well, we were really rushing to finish the game at this stage, because we were the last ones to finish, and we were behind, so we had to rush. So, that led to me failing to all-out attack with Bastian in the previous turn against the General, which I could have done, but I just didn't because we were in a rush. So that led to him surviving, and then my opponent, because he was rushed, then forgot that killing Krondis would probably kill the Arch Revenant as well, and then died. So it kind of cancels out because we both did something silly because we were rushed, but it results in neither side getting the grand strategy. And we do manage to score some objectives in the last round. The Concussors get killed by the Kurnoths, but that doesn't really do anything for the game result. And at the end there, I'm able to score another 3, my opponent gets another 2. So, the final result, as you can see, is that I have scored a mighty 21. My opponent looks like he's got 15 there at the end of turn 4, but then in turn 5 is then able to intimidate the invaders and pick up another 5. So, 21, 20, no grand strategies, and it's going to be a draw, because you need a difference of 2 to make it a win at these events. So I think a draw is reasonable there. Neither of us have got much stuff left on the table. Obviously, if I had got a double earlier on, I think it would have been heavily swinging in my favour. And if I'd never got a double during the whole game, it would have been heavily against me, because I think I needed it towards the end to keep my dragons kicking for a bit longer. But obviously, that early double would have been totally devastating had I got that. But I think a draw, very happy with that, obviously, against one of the Australian Worlds contingent. Very good results, so I'll accept that. Next game, we're on to Spring the Trap. By the way, anyone who's just joined the audience, I just saw the number jump up. this may well be the quickest turnaround for playing in a tournament and then doing the reports from the tournament. I got back and immediately started transferring the images onto the PC. And could have broken my own record there. So whoever is watching this live, feel free to comment along, by the way. There is a bit in there already. Let me know what you're looking forward to about Age of Sigmar 4, or any observations on these games, obviously. So we're on to Spring the Trap in round 3. And I'm up against the Soulblight Gravelords. So the way this works is that you deploy in the centre like that, and then you can put some units into reserve on the flanks, and then they can pop in later. Spoiler alert, neither of the armies are going to be doing that, because Stormcast can put things in the heavens anyway, so don't really need it. And Soulblight Gravelords can come up from the grave site with half their units anyway. So they don't care about that either. And when I say half, I don't know exactly how many they can put in there. But there is a bit on the table, as you can see, which I think is mostly to screen off the casters. So, let's see what's in the opposing army. Off the table, we've got 2 zombie dragons. 250 points each. We've got 6 Vargeists. We have got several units of bats. 3 units of 3 bats. Fell bats to be precise. There is a Vengari Lord, and anything special about him. So that's the general. Ignores ranged rend, which is handy, that it tells me in the list here what it does. And +1 to all saves in Battle Regiment summonables. So that's pretty cool. Command trait the Bait, which I think is you can kind of, is it force someone to charge you, that ability? It could be what it is. And it's just pretty powerful. And then there are 2 Vampire Lords on foot hanging out there. So they're not necromancers, they are vampires. So they're actually pretty decent at fighting. One of them has Primal Frost, Hoarfrost spell. So that's going to make some of the terrible units good. And also summonable are Dire Wolves. I think there's a unit of 10 that aren't visible in the pictures. So for my strategy here, what is the plan? Well, Bastian is quite good against terrible units, and Soulblight Gravelords have terrible units. They have the wolves that aren't around yet and the bats, so if he can just mow down those for the whole game, I'd be quite happy with that. He's less of a threat to the big, scary stuff. The Vengari Lord and the vampires on foot can get their wounds back when they bite you in combat. So whenever they wound you, they get their wounds back, I think, up to 6, which is obviously very scary, and I've faced that before and been caught out by it before and not realising it was a thing before, so I'm definitely keeping that in mind. So if you're going to commit to them in combat, you have to go in and make sure you kill them before they strike you, otherwise they're going to heal up. I think Krondis will obviously be good against any big units, but really that's only going to be the Dire Wolves, maybe the Vargeists, who would get quite a few attacks against them potentially. But we don't know where they're coming in yet. And shooty attacks, obviously shooting against the Vengari Lord would be nice, but mortal wound shooting would be better because he's ignoring ranged rend, and the Stardrake has -3 ranged rend. So obviously I could reduce his save with a spell from Krondis. The Lord Relictor is just getting ready to teleport one of these 2 units, if need be. And we'll see how it goes. There's no fancy scoring in this one, no units in ambush, so it's just straightforward, get on the objectives and hold them. So, magical dominance for the enemy, because I make them go first, and I turn Bastian into an unbinder. The reason I do that is because it's going to force the Vengari Lord over here. And all it's going to do, really, is force the Soulblight to use the heroic action to teleport one of the heroes out of unbinding range. So, the fact that they can't get, for example, another command point, it's not really a huge deal, but it's just a little thing. Anytime even if it's an automatic thing that I turn Bastian into an unbinder, he's not going to be able to use it because they're going to teleport out of unbinding range. He's still making them do it at the expense of something else, even if it's not going to succeed. We've got bats towing onto objectives. The Vengari Lord actually takes a wound as a result of one of his spells that's an attempted cast. Fails and wounds him, I think. And then we've got more bats onto objective. We've got a zombie dragon in the middle of an objective. And the wolves have emerged from the grave site, which is the little red dot there. There's one over here and one over there next to Bastian as well. So the wolves are on there, and one wound is done to Bastian with shooting, which I think is the zombie dragon. And does a wound to him. He doesn't care too much about that. Look at this live dice rolling action. A human hand. So 5 points scored, easy, and onto my turn. I go for surround and destroy. So, here's my thinking. I don't necessarily want to get everyone into combat yet, and I don't think I'm going to be able to necessarily charge them anyway, because can a zombie dragon redeploy, or does it need a hero nearby? I don't know that for a fact. So, Bastian's been redeployed over to this side. Now, this is actually a terrible mistake choosing surround and destroy. Not because I can't do it, but because of the precise measurements involved. I should have checked beforehand, because it is actually going to limit my abilities now. So, I've teleported Bastian over there, 9 inches away. I'm going to go for a charge with him. Only if the Tempesters also make it into the zombie dragon. Because I'm shooting it as well. But the problem is it keeps making its ward saves, because I want to whittle it down, charge it, and then have Bastian standing here within 6 inches of the table edge for the battle tactic, and also kill a zombie dragon. However, it makes a load of ward saves, and then the Tempesters fail their charge as well, so I don't even try with Bastian, because if he goes in on his own, I just auto-fail it. Then, this is where the mistake comes in. So my mistake was in not measuring correctly the fact that I couldn't tow on the objective without setting off redeploy for the fell bats, which means that they could redeploy and come to within 6 inches of the Stardrake. And I had to run to get here, so I couldn't also then charge unless I choose to do my once per game run and charge ability. And I wasn't prepared to do that, because let's go back here, if I were to declare that and go to within 9 of them, then I've kind of wasted it, and they can redeploy away anyway. So I might still fail the charge, because it's already quite a distance. And I'd only be able to get to, like, here, I think, with the run. So I didn't want to waste that yet. So it was just a bit of a miscalculation, because it means I now can't be on the objective, so I'm losing points to get my battle tactic. So I should have just picked a different one this turn. I should have picked I've had easier ones that I could have picked. I could pick Intimidate the Invaders, because I'm piling everyone out of my territory anyway. So it was unnecessary. Krondus is the only one that's steaming in, and he kills a load of wolves in the middle. He does have to have some buffs on him as well. He's got Mystic Shield and Celestial Blades. And 3 points. So a bit of a battle tactic blunder there, you might say. Should have gone for a different one that was actually mathematically easier, and based on the distances involved, should have checked it all first. And I win the priority roll, and I decide to give the turn away. I do not want the double yet. You'll see I've not brought most of my Dracoths down, because there's just nowhere good to put them. So I'm not fully committing to attacking the enemy yet, because wherever I put them, I'm only going to be attacking bats. Or one zombie dragon. And I'm just going to wait and give away the turn, because all the hard-hitting stuff is far away from me anyway. One of the zombie dragons isn't even on the table yet. The Vengari Lord is all the way over there, and this one only has Tempesters and Bastian to fight. I wouldn't be too disappointed getting into a fight there. So I give away the turn. My opponent goes for Surround and Destroy, which should be easier because there are bats to use for it. And I turn the Stardrake into an Unbinder because the Vengari Lord is in the corner, ready to try and do some spells. And the Zombie Dragon moves away a bit from Bastian and the Tempesters, and the Vargeists land here, in range of the gravesite and out of range of my units. Zombie Dragon pops up over here. I think when they emerge, they don't necessarily have to do it from the gravesites, the Zombie Dragons. This one's just appeared here, and it's going to try and eat the Lord Relictor. Shoots 3 wounds onto him. And Krondus finishes off the wolves, and my opponent scores 5 again for being on the objectives, but here is the situation. I am now looking at the possibility of a double, and I think it's opened up a bit. I can get to things that are worth killing now because the enemy doesn't have reserves off the table anymore. So, There are things that can come back to life when you've killed off the unit. They can come back at half strength, like the wolves. And what I'm going to try and do is kill the Vargeists now, and the zombie dragon. Kill that blob of meat there. Ignore the Vengari Lord for now, because he is kind of screened off from my units dropping out the sky by bats. So I'd just like to munch this area, because I've got Bastian to use, I've got Tempesters, I've got Krondys in the vicinity, and I can drop in some more units as well. So I go for secure the battlefield. I want to have one of my units in each table section, each table quarter, 6 inches away from the enemy. So the Lord Relictor is able to teleport himself somewhere, of course, so he could teleport into this corner. I can bring units down and not charge them in. I've got another unit of Tempesters I can use that for. I can leave these ones here on the hill when they're shooting. So they're going to be holding this area, and the Stardrake can just hold this area by killing all the bats. And that's potentially it. As long as I'm holding all the table quarters. So Relictor teleports over there. Bastian and Krondys go in and clean out most of the Vargeists. There's only one left. And I've taken that objective now. The Tempesters are holding that zone. The Concussors come down over here and hold this zone. I decide not to charge them in. Had the Stardrake failed its charge into the bats, then I would have charged them in, because the Stardrake would have been holding this area. But since he made the charge, I didn't need to do this one as well, so they're holding the area, and I've got the chance of a double. They just shoot some wounds onto the zombie dragon instead. And other Tempesters pop up in the corner up there. And you can see, though, that the reason they were able to do that is because the Vengari Lord had moved away. And he was then able to countercharge into the Stardrake, which is one of those things that I didn't really see coming particularly. I'd probably been told about it beforehand. But he got into the Stardrake, and I did some good wounds back to him, because I can use strike first. But then, when he stabs me, he then gets his wounds back again. So they've both been wounded, and the Stardrake is questioning his life choices now. So I do get 5 points though, because I'm holding objectives. I think I'm holding these two. And it's looking okay. Looking pretty good if I get the next turn. Could be very spicy indeed. And what's going to happen if I get the next turn? Well, the Concussors are going to come over here and help the Stardrake. Bastian and Krondys are going to try and finish off these units around here. The Tempesters are going to start chasing down vampires. And I will just be able to score points quite happily, I think. Let's see who gets it, and it's my opponent. Oh dear. Yes, the priority rolls haven't been going very well for me at this event so far. And my opponent goes for bait the trap, so retreat 2 units, charge 2 different units. So, the Vengari Lord and the Stardrake dueling zombie dragon, going after the Concussors, but they redeploy to get a little bit further away. The bats charge into Bastian to satisfy the conditions of the battle tactic. Zombie dragon makes it into the Concussors and kills one of them. But then the Concussor, when fighting back, does actually kill the zombie dragon, which is great. So that's a good trade for me. Bastian kills the bats. Krondys kills the last Vargeist. The Vengari Lord has the worst round of attacks I've ever seen from such a model, and does not hurt the Stardrake at all, who then takes off some of his wounds. So, here is a situation. You're fighting a model like this. You don't really want to attack it first if you don't think you're going to kill it. If you attack first and then it attacks you, it's going to heal its wounds back. So if it's already at full health, wait for it to attack and then attack it. So the wounds you actually put on it stick. And it's going to be my turn next, definitely, so the Stardrake can retreat out of this combat and then still shoot. So this guy's in big danger. He's only got 4 wounds left. So 5 victory points for the Soul Blights, but it is my turn now. And I go for Intimidate the Invaders, so everyone out of my territory, which is an auto-complete, really. And we've got Tempesters coming over from the left to do some shooting. We've got Krondys steaming into the middle, and he deals with, let's see who was there, a vampire. Krondys kills the vampire in the middle. The Star Drake retreats from combat, the remaining Concussor heads over here, the Tempestors move onto the hill, and they all start shooting at the Vengari Lord and kill him. So this is looking very healthy for the Stormcast now. It's still going to be close scoring-wise, but in terms of the table, I've only lost one model, and there's barely any Soul Blights left. These dogs did come back to life. So I get 5 points there. My opponent gets the priority roll again, though, which means that he's going to be able to score some points now, and is basically just going to be able to drop bats and stuff onto the objectives and try and score. Getting the bats and the wolves into combat with the Tempestors there, and spreading out, trying to touch the objectives. And yep, not scoring though. Not able to do a battle tactic, which I can't remember what it was. It may have been one of the Soul Blight ones that just failed. I don't know whether he needed to reach the objective possibly to secure it. But I don't think I even took a picture of... Oh yeah, I did. It's just blurry. So led into the Maelstrom. So yeah, the issue was that he failed his charge, the vampire. So it was just a failed battle tactic. And then no objectives were held either. So bad times to be a vampire count in the Soul Blight Gravelords. See, there is one in there. I didn't misname the faction. So I go for Magical Dominance now. And there is attempt to dispel my... or unbind my spells, but I do have +3 to cast on Krondys, so I'm quite confident I'm going to get it off. The Tempestors finish chewing through the enemy. So I've just remembered, I think the enemy grand strategy is to return... or no, mine is to kill all the battle line. So, if the enemy battle line come back to life in the last turn, and I'm not able to kill them, that would fail the grand strategy. I think. I think that's how Overshadow works. I am going to double check actually though, to make sure I've not been doing it wrong. Let me see. So, Overshadow. So why is the Age of Sigmar app telling me that I don't own the General's Handbook? So I can't even read it. It's lying! Okay, well that's fun. Anyway, moving on. So, onto my turn 5, I only score 3, because I don't think there's a battle tactic I can do. And I have tabled the enemy at this point, pretty much. There is 2 bats maybe up there. I'm not sure if they're still alive. I think they pop out actually from there. So, okay. Here's the issue. I won the priority roll. I took the turn thinking I would be able to screen off the grave sites with my models and stop them coming back to life, because I just need to sit on top of the grave sites, stop them coming back. However, that's because I didn't understand how the grave sites work exactly. So, in my turn... you have to be 9 inches away, but in their own turn you can be 3 inches away from the enemy within 12 of the grave site. So I have no way of screening them off. So I've chosen to go next, even though it's going to cost me a grand strategy. Because if I gave away the turn, my opponent would bring a unit back from the grave site, and then I would just kill them. So I would get my grand strategy. But because I thought I could screen out the grave sites with my units and didn't realise exactly how they worked, then I took the turn. So I'm going to lose my grand strategy because of that. So there is a grand strategy for the Soul Blight Gravelords, but as you can see, no scoring in the last couple of turns, so it is still a win for the Stormcast. It's just a narrow win. So obviously, with my failure in the first round to do big scoring, slightly messing up on the battle tactic there, could have been a wider margin, and obviously should have been, but I chose the wrong turn order in the last round. So, still a win though, and that's the important thing. On to the next round. And let's pull up my opponent's list for this round, which is on the Geomantic Pulse. And the way that works is that in round 2, whoever's going second, critically, picks A or B to become the Pulse. And at that point, a rich vein of victory points appears and works its way from one side to the other over the course of the next 4 rounds. So, In the first round, you can't score much because the pulse isn't active. Second round, you can score a decent amount. Third and fourth round, you can score a ton of points. And fifth round, you can score a lot of points, but not as many as 3 and 4. So 3 and 4 are the big rounds when the pulse is in the middle, because then you have 2 adjacent to the pulse objectives, which are worth 1 as well. So that's how you get the extra points. So, there's my layout in the middle, because I don't know where the pulse is going to be yet. And I'm up against the Gloomspite Gits. And it is the King's Gits and Grand Strategy Chasing the Moon, which I think is B... Do something under the light of the moon. I can't remember. There's a lot of light of the moon stuff, and there's a lot of other things in there that allow the light of the moon effects to be bestowed upon units even when they're not under the moon. So there's going to be a lot of mooning going on in this game. And you can see the Loon Shrine there, which is important for resurrecting the enemy units when they die. So they can come back at half strength via the Loon Shrine. So, let me go through the list. There's a lot of Troggoths in here. We have got a Dankhold Trogboss. Hold on. Where's the Dankhold Trogboss? I think it's the more pale looking one. It might be there. I think that's the Trogboss. So, that is 210 points. It's the general, and I think keeping the general alive is important. Maybe it's at the end of the game the general is under the effects of the bad moon, something like that. So yeah, the general needs to be alive at the end, I think. The grand strategy. So there he is. And there is Scragrot, the Loon King, who is down here somewhere. I think that's him at the back, who is a spellcaster. There's a Madcap Shaman as well in here somewhere amongst the rabble. And has Merciless Blizzard, which may be useful. There are 20 Moon Clan Stabbers, and they have nets, so there'll be some -1 to hit action going on around this army as well. Then there are 3 Fellwater Troggoths, so they have the Vomit attack. And then there are 6 Rockgut Troggoths there, and 3 over there, so they have a ward save. Or some kind of regeneration, some kind of ability to negate wounds. There are 2 Dankhold Troggoths in a unit, which are the big extra spicy trolls there. There is Gobapalooza, which is somewhere amongst this lot, which is a wild unit that has spells, it has effects it can do. Very complicated, but each model has different abilities it can do. And then there are 8 Cruel Boys Monster Killers, and as soon as I hear that, I think that sounds terrifying. It's a unit of allies, some Cruel Boys, who have lots of abilities against monsters. So they can put debuffs on monsters, they get bonuses against monsters, they can deny monstrous rampages, I think, as well. So just very scary against monsters, so I would like to avoid them, and we'll see where they are in a moment. So, what is my plan? Well, the scariest stuff is the unit of 6 Troggoths. If I can avoid them, that would be plan A. If I could get them down to 1 Troggoth and leave it alive, that would be great, because then they can't come back as a unit of 3. So ideally killing them with shooting, so they can't then like kamikaze the next one in. But there is the chance that you'll just kill them by accident if you're going that hard into killing them, and they can also fail Battle Shock as well and die quite easily. So it's difficult to leave them on 1. But ideally, I don't want to be fighting that unit unless I'm going all in. The 2 Troggoths over there, I think they have an ability to get their wounds back, and so does the General. He gets D6 back, they get D3, which is obviously good. So I would like to not fight them unless I'm ready to kill them. The Grots out in the front, they're going to be a good target for Draconith Destruction, where I can kill them with one of my dragons or Dracoth units to get a battle tactic, because there's a lot of them in the unit, but they can actually contest objectives from further away until I kill 1 model. So I'm going to give away the first turn again, and Magical Dominance is played as usual. You can see some buffs are being dished out here, so I think that one's Mystic Shield, and that one is some kind of buff as well, possibly from the Gobapalooza. these Troggoths head on to the left objective. You only have to touch one objective in the first round to score, because there's no pulse yet, so you can't get bonuses. And the Grots move up into the middle. Everything else keeping a nice tight formation behind. So if I want to drop down, the only things I can hit are the big unit of 6 Troggoths and these sad little gits here. And these guys. I can't hit any of the big stuff yet, particularly. So on my turn, what am I going to commit to? I'm not going to overly commit, because normally I want to go for the double early, but I do not want that, because I want to win the priority roll in the next round and give away the turn so that I can choose which end the pulse starts on. Now the bad moon is starting over here, so it's going to go to the middle and then here at some point, probably. That means that if I have the pulse over this side, it's starting in the bad moon, and in late game, when the pulse gets down here, the bad moon is going to be on the objectives. So logically, the left would be a good place to put it. However, that is where this very dangerous unit is, and it's where the shrine is. Which means that when the enemy units come back to life, they can come back near where the pulse is heading to towards the end of the game, and they're going to be dead in the end of the game, or in the late game, so that's when they're going to be coming back to life. So I'm conflicted on it, because if I start it on the left and move it down this way, that takes it away from the bad moon, but it also means that early in the game it'll be near this shrine, but the dangerous units that I'm most scared of are on this side of the table. So there is the Trog boss, the 2 Trog, what are they even called? There's too much troggery going on here. So 2 Dankhold Troggoths there. I'm not very happy about facing them. So there's more scary units on this side, even though the scary unit of the 6 trolls is on that side. So if I make it move from right to left, I'll be making it keep up with the bad moon, and it'll be near the shrine at the end of the game. So 2 downsides, but it's also starting far away from more of the dangerous units. And by the time the pulse gets to the left, I might have the chance to destroy the shrine with one of my monsters anyway. So I'm conflicted on which side to put it on, so it depends where the enemy positioning is at the end of the first turn, really. So I've got to keep an open mind. So Magical Dominance is succeeded with. You can only get a maximum of 3 points in the first round on this battle plan. I go for Draconic Destruction, and all I want to do is drop down. Let me go back a sec. I want to drop down and kill all these Moon Clan stabbers. There's 20 of them. So I'm going to bring down my Tempesters to shoot them. I'm going to shoot them with my 2 big dragons as well. And then hopefully I don't have to charge them, because I want to be far away from the enemy dangerous units and give away the turn, and then I can pick which side to put the pulse on. So let's see if I can shoot down those grots. And I use the Bless Prayer onto the Stardrake, because I don't want to be with it wholly within 12 of the objective to get the ward save that way, because I don't want to be that far forward. So I put -1 save onto them with Krondys' spell, and then I start shooting them, and they all die. So that's good. Got a battle tactic, and I'm in a prime position here. Very good defensive posture, so I can give away the turn and pick where to put the pulse. Now, because all those grots are dead, and the enemy are not over on this side at all, I'm thinking of starting it here, because the enemy won't be able to contest the pulse then immediately. If I put it there, then the enemy are going to be on it instantly and score loads of points. If I put it over here, the enemy can't physically reach it in 1 turn, so that's 1 turn they're not going to be scoring the pulse. So denying the enemy scoring, I'm just going to be careful. I'm going to have to do my scoring early, because in late game, when the pulse gets over here, then, oh yeah, the light of the bad moon is the whole table now. So when the pulse gets down at this end, it's going to be near the Loon Shrine, it's going to be in the bad moon area, and I may suffer at the end of the game from that, but I'm going to try and do my scoring early, and try and build up a lead, and then just try and hold out. We'll see if it works, and I do win the priority. I give it away, as denoted by the finger there, and I start the pulse on the right, as described momentarily, or moments ago, should I say. My opponent goes for Glory Grabbers, which is pick an objective controlled by your opponent, and complete this tactic. If you control that objective, and a friendly unit of Gloomspite Gits was added to your army as a replacement unit using the Bad Moon's Loon Shrine. So, there's a risk to pick this because you have to bring a unit back from the dead, which is on a 4+, but you can re-roll it because of one of the hero abilities, I think. So I turned Bastian into an Unbinder to try and shut down some more spells. And Itchy Nuisance is cast onto the Tempesters there, which is mildly annoying, and then they take a couple of wounds from some shooting or magic there. So, let's see how this advance goes for the Troggoths. So the Dank Cold Troggoth, the dangerous ones, move up, so I redeploy the Tempesters away because I don't want to get hit yet. And 5, so that's really good roll. The Trogs here, the Fellwater Troggoths are in the middle, and they have a -1 to shoot at them, put on them. I think that's an ability from the Gobbapalooza. And then the Rock Gut Troggoths surround them. So if I charge in, they'll be able to do their Unleash Hell, and then I'll be attacked by the big troll block. Now, as soon as I see this, I'm actually pleased about this, and I'll tell you why when we go to a wide shot in a minute before my turn. So everyone else has not been able to accomplish much by me giving away the turn, and they do hold this objective by piling the trolls onto it, so they're going to get 1 point for it. So that's a bonus point they get there. But they're not going to be on the pulse, so denying the enemy some scoring, which is great. So, why am I so happy about this situation? I've got the possibility of a double turn. I've already got all my units in striking distance. Both of these units can't redeploy away from me, so I'm going to be able to fight. I've got the Quicksilver still in play, so I can attack with both my big dragons potentially. This is what I'm thinking. But then, when we get into the next turn, I remember that for this game we actually decided that the hill was an impassable piece of terrain that you can't stand on. So I'm probably not going to be able to fit both dragons into combat there. So Krondys is going to be reduced to a shooting role, and I'm going to have the Tempesters, I'm going to bring some Concussors down, I'm going to put Bastian and the Stardrake in. And we'll see if we can murder a ton of trolls. So, my turn. I go for Lead into the Maelstrom, charge a hero and a battle line unit, and still be in combat. So the reason I'm confident about this is because I'm charging into 2 units. So if I put all my attacks on 1 unit and leave the other unit alive, then I'm still in combat. So, here we go. Now, I also bring down the Concussors up there, Tempesters there, and you can see Krondys obviously didn't get into combat because there's not enough space. But everyone gets into combat, and I murder all the trolls. So with my shooting, because I've got Tempesters here as well, these ones moved up, and the Stardrake, all the shooting, I murdered a ton of the Rock Gut Troggoths. Bastian went into combat, and then he decided he was going to, because the Concussors had made their charge in there into Gobbapalooza, who have quite a lot of wounds, Bastian decides to kill the Fellwater Troggoths. And because I hadn't killed the Gobbapalooza, that then means that I've satisfied the conditions of the battle tactic by having the Concussors still in combat with Gobbapalooza, so I was free to murder all the trolls here, which is great. If I hadn't succeeded with that Concussor charge, or if I'd accidentally killed the entire Gobbapalooza, then I would have had to leave one of the units alive here. So all the trolls are dead, which is amazing, and obviously a unit could potentially come back next turn. But I didn't point out actually that the Gits failed to bring back a unit with the shrine, so failed the battle tactic in that round, so even less points dished out. So I went big, threw everything into this area, cleared it out of trolls, and I'm going to try and work my way this way across the table, following the pulse as it moves. So I'm holding the pulse, I'm holding the one adjacent to the pulse, and that's going to let me score big. So, 6 points for the round. I then get the double. So this is the dream now. Now, looking at this, it's not as amazing as some doubles are, because I'm not going to be able to just wipe out the enemy. But I see an opportunity to finish off Gobbapalooza, kill this shaman, and kill the enemy general in one go, before the tough stuff over here can come over to support. So I take the double based on that. Also, I get first crack at scoring the objectives as well. So this one's going to become the pulse. The enemy are on it, but I can put a dragon on it to claim it, Whereas if I let the enemy take the turn, then even though they can't do much damage to me, they can still score points. And I'd rather they didn't do that. So I'm going to take the double and try and clear out this area and push my way towards the Loon Shrine. Because if I can destroy the Loon Shrine before the pulse gets down here, that would be great. So I go for secure the battlefield, 1 Stormcast unit on its own, away from the enemy in each table quarter. So I've got Tempesters who are good for that because they don't have to charge, they can just shoot and do their thing. The Lord Relictor can teleport to do that. And the Concussors will have hopefully murdered the Gobbapalooza, or they'll move away from them. So here we go. The Tempesters spread out a bit, so they're holding these 2 sections. The Relictor teleports over there, and Stardrake and Bastian murder everything around here. So the enemy general is killed horribly. There is still 1 member of Gobbapalooza left, which is hilarious. I also killed a wizard as well, because I was able to pile in with the Stardrake far enough and eat the wizard. I don't remember whether I ate him or just killed him in the normal way. And Krondys is holding this table quarter, while also holding this objective, because there's not enough enemies there to stop me. So I'm going to score really big for this round, and I've cleared out some important enemy units. So 7 points, and that's a nice big lead built up now. So this was the plan. Score big early from having the pulse on this side, and then just try and survive the final rounds, and I'm in a good position to do that. So my opponent goes for Intimidate the Invaders, which is generally an autocomplete one unless you do something really wrong. I have left enough space, sadly, for this guy to teleport onto the pulse. Because I went big into killing, I didn't really factor in that I could have a unit towing onto the pulse, which would prevent the enemy doing that. But if I had done that, then the teleport spell could have just teleported a more significant unit over here and got more bodies on it. So I think it could have been done anyway. It's one of those situations where you'd rather make them to teleport a more significant unit over here, because they're just coming into like the ultimate crossfire where they're just going to get killed by everything. So the Rock Gut, no, not the Rock Gut, the Dankhold Troggoths get into Krondys on the charge. They're staying away from Bastian though, because if they'd gone within 9 of Bastian, he could have redeployed onto this objective and denied the enemy having the pulse. So Krondys is down to 7 wounds. They've taken some wounds in retaliation. And some Troggoths have come back to life from the Loon Shrine, and they are now blocking off the path from Bastian and the Stardrake. So 6 points scored for the Gits. Into turn 4, and I win the priority, and I'm going to take the turn, because if I don't take it, I think this is potentially dangerous. Krondys could die. They could potentially kill the Stardrake, maybe. They would have to get through Bastian or ignore him entirely. But also, the pulse is about to appear here for the first time, and if the opponent holds that, they're going to score big again. So I need to take the turn and try and take this area off them, ideally. If I don't, then I'll just kill as much as possible. So I go for Surround and Destroy, because I've got a unit that's nowhere near the enemy anyway at the moment, so I'm going to duck them over here. My Concussors can move over there, and the Tempesters can take over, finishing off the Gobbapalooza, and the Relictor can do it as well, just by hanging out over here. He's going to make his way slowly down the table edge to get towards this objective, for when it becomes the pulse later on, he wants to be able to jump on it if the trolls move away. So, Surround and Destroy. Krondys has killed one of the Dankholds, and Stardrake and Bastian get through the Troggoths, but I don't manage to get onto the pulse, which is sad, but I do hold this one, and I do some good shooting damage, but only 3 onto this guy, which is sad, so he's still alive. I get my battle tactic, but it's not the highest scoring turn in the world, but you will notice the most important thing, I used the Stardrake to destroy the Loon Shrine. So rather than trying to take the pulse with the Stardrake when there are all these monster hunters on it, I chose, you know what, I'll just get rid of the Loon Shrine instead, stopping it on coming back. And that's going to be a better long-term goal. So Loon Shrine gone, but I only score 4. So like I said, I was just building up that lead early on, and now just hanging on to it and doing my best to keep the lead going. Just clinging on. Turn 4 for the enemy. So the monster hunters have now got their eye on Krondis, and they're combining with lots of trolls to attack him, which does mean that they're abandoning this objective. So the pulse is still here though, so that's the important one. They stay out of range of the Stardrake and Bastians, so they can't redeploy onto there. And scoring 6 again. So it's a good round of scoring for the Gits, but it's not really closing the gap enough at this stage. They're going to need a big last round. But they do kill Krondis. So that's actually the first model I've lost in this game. Only Krondis died. And in the last game I think I only lost 1 model as well. But that was very close scoring still, somehow. So it's the way the Stormcast work though. You don't have a lot of bodies for objectives, so it's hard to stop the enemy scoring. And it's difficult sometimes to get all your own battle tactics with this kind of list, because you can't always spare units to be in positions, and you also lack the ability to do some of the faction battle tactics. There's some that rely on having Redeemer units, some that you need Cities of Sigmar units for. There's even the good one that I did successfully pull off in this game, requires you to not be in combat with some of your units, and when I've only got this many units to begin with, it's difficult to justify using that one sometimes. So I get the priority roll for turn 5, which is a big deal, because now I'm going to be able to get to the pulse before the enemy. Because the enemy currently hold this one. So if I didn't get the priority, then they would have scored a decent turn of tactics here. For my grand strategy, I need to kill the 3 Troggoths there. So we'll see if I can do it. Otherwise, I'm just going to be scoring on the pulse. So I do take out all the monster hunters with the Stardrake and Bastian, and can't get through the final Dankhold Troggoth, but I do take the important objectives of the round. And with all my shooting from my Tempesters and the Stardrake, I leave 1 Rock Gut Troggoth left on 2 wounds, so I'm going to fail my grand strategy unless he tries to charge me, which would be a bad idea. So I managed to score 6 for the final round, so I'm definitely going to win. It's up to whether the enemy can score any more points, and they decide, actually, you know what, I can't. The only thing I could do, from the Gloomspite Gits perspective, there was a battle tactic that would have involved killing the Stardrake, I think. But in order to do that, because you're already in combat with Bastian, so even if you could pile in round there to fight the Stardrake, unlikely to do it on his own, so this guy would probably have to come in to help, and if he dies, then I get my grand strategy. So actually, you're really just giving me points by trying to do that, I think. So he decides, I'll just stop there, there's nothing else worth doing, so no points scored, and it's a nice healthy win for the Stormcast. And over the last 2 games, I've only lost 2 models combined. So 2 really strong games there, even though one of them was only a tiny win points-wise. This one was much juicier. And the priority rolls did turn in my favour a bit in this game, which was helpful. They've been quite bad up to then. So I took pictures of some of the armies that were out for coolest army voting at lunchtime. So we've got some very cool Slanesh with some very nice skin painting there. We've got some Seraphon, very bright. There's the Sylvaneth that I already faced. We have got some lovely Seraphon there as well. Nice colours there. We've got the Soulblight Gravelords, as already seen. We have got some Slaves to Darkness, which are very cool as well. I like the bases, especially on these. Very natural looking. And the final round. Limited resources. So this is where the objectives can switch off for you if you hold on to them for too long. So if your opponent doesn't take them back, then they will switch off and you can no longer score any more points out of them. So, I'm up against the Slanesh forces. Now, this is quite a complicated Slanesh force, and this is another one of the Australian Worlds players that had come over for this event. So, out of 5 games, I've had to play 3 of them. I got a draw out of one of them, and now I'm facing another. Can I get anything out of this game? When I hear about all the special rules for the Slanesh forces, I'm not too confident, but I'll go through the list and tell you about it anyway. Now, had I won this game, I would be in with a chance of maybe finishing like 2nd or 3rd at the event, which would have been cool. But I'm not confident in doing that, so my goal really is to keep the score down here and try and preserve dignity. So there is Shalaxi Hellbane, which is this one, I think. 370 points of pretty survivable and decently killy Slanesh demon goodness. There is Glutos, who is nearly 500 points. He is really good. He has lots of abilities that he can do. I think it's just -1 to hits that he does as well. So there's lots of -1 to hit and wound things for this army, which is obviously annoying. And there is, I think that a lot of ward saves and stuff comes up as well as depravity points are built up, which are by offering the temptation dice. So the temptation dice, whenever I make an attack against them, my opponent can pick a dice and say, I'll turn that into one of these temptation dice that I've got off on the side. If you take it, you can change your roll to this, but I gain depravity. And if I decline, then I might take a load of mortal wounds. So I decide, you know what, I'm not going to engage with that mechanic at all. I'm just going to say yes to every temptation dice and just let you hit maximum depravity. Because the grand strategy for my opponent is to not summon anything, so it's never going to be spent. So it's just going to hit the cap and then give ward saves to everything. I think it's mostly the foot, the infantry that are going to get ward saves. And like -1 to hit things, that sort of thing from the depravity. So I just decide, you know what, I'll just say that the game we're going to play at the highest depravity level. I'll just accept every temptation dice. I don't want to take any wounds, and I'll just not have to think about that. Just go through the game accepting all the temptation dice. To keep it simple, because there's a lot of complicated stuff going on with this army. So I am going to let my opponent go first. My plan is to not fight very much, because I'm going to be negatively buffed, debuffed if you will, especially around Glutos, so I'm just going to stay away from him and only do fighting when the enemy have advanced far enough. And I'll try not to shut down too many objectives too fast. So hopefully I can keep scoring for a while. Now, a general strategy in this battle plan is to not start on any objectives, because if you start on it, you count as controlling it. So that means it's just ticking down, and it's going to switch off for you after you've held it for 2 turns in a row. However, I'm thinking that actually towing onto one objective at the start might not actually be a bad idea, because what happens when I give away the turn, my opponent chooses to only touch one objective, which means that he then scores 4 points for the round rather than 5, which is okay, but that's also only one objective that's ticking down for Slanesh then, that's going to be switched off, which going forward is a good move, because you get 1 for having more and 1 for having an objective, so you're going to get 4 points if you do your battle tactic, and you've only got 1 objective that's going to switch off eventually, whereas when I go first, because my opponent is on 1, I then have to touch 2 of them to get more. So to score 5 points, I have to touch 2, which starts the countdown on 2 of the objectives then. So I'm thinking maybe putting a toe on one of them might not be a bad idea at the start, because you're going to want to take 1 objective in your first turn anyway, and you force your opponent to activate 2 objectives then if they want to get more victory points. Otherwise they'll be stuck with 3 points only if they just touch 1 objective in their first round. So maybe towing on an objective, not necessarily the worst idea. Something to think about. I don't know if this battle plan's going away entirely in 4th edition, so maybe it's nothing to think about whatsoever. But you never know, there might be something similar, or it might come back. So, I'm going to avoid fighting where possible, and if I think I can kill something, I will, but otherwise I'm just going to avoid it and try and score points. Try and stay alive as long as possible and preserve my dignity. Give away turn 1, my opponent does magical dominance. And you can see some spell effects. I think that is Mystic Shield or Arcane Bolt is being represented there. And also the, let's see, who is it? I think it's this one here, has challenged Krondys, which basically means Krondys is going to be terrible at fighting against this character. So even less reason for me to engage. And this is the one that's coming forward the most, so this is the one I'm going to be able to attack. The main spells I'm interested in shutting down are the ability for Glutos to fly, because that makes him very fast. So that is one I want to shut down. He's staying off the objective, so just one objective, so scoring 4 points. Happy to take 1 victory point less in order to shut down less of the objectives. So, good thinking there. I go for magical dominance as well. Oh dear. So, I go for magical dominance, and I can just translocate Krondys out of range of unbinding, but I decide I don't need to do that, I'll just go for a spell anyway. I cast Mystic Shield. I get a 1 and a 2. At this point, my brain should have been saying, well, abandon that spell, you can still cast another one because you haven't miscast. So it's not counted as unbound, because it's not been unbound, so just cast another spell. However, I decide, you know what, I feel confident, I'm not going to roll a 1, I'll throw a primal in there, and I roll a 1 on the primal. So it's a primal miscast, so I can't cast any more spells, so I fail the battle tactic. So that is quite comical, and then as a result of that, I also lose 6 wounds with Krondys, and splash damage onto the Lord Relictor and Bastian, who take almost the maximum as well. So not the ideal start. So I've put Bastian onto this objective, I've touched this objective with the Star Drake, so I'm going to get 3 points for failing the battle tactic. So I should be in the lead really at this point, because my opponent chose to play the long game. Oh dear, how sad. So my opponent wins the priority roll and gives me the next turn. And I'm just going to not engage. So Bastian is moving up here. So I do surround and destroy, so Bastian is going to do it. Star Drake is as well, and the Lord Relictor on this side. So I'm still staying away, and I'm just doing long range shooting with the Star Drake at this character there, which is Shalaxi. I think the other one is just a standard Keeper of Secrets, which is over on the left. I don't even know if I mentioned that. Did I even finish going through the list? I don't think I did, you know. So there are 3 lots of 11 Blissbarb Archers as well. And 5 Blissbarb Seekers, which are the cavalry there. I think I got distracted midway through going through the list. So, you can see all these 9-inch things going down, because you don't want enemies popping in your back line, as it were. So you don't want Stormcast dropping down behind you. So just marking out exactly where I'm going to be able to drop. Let's see, Warhammer Orchard. Slaanesh's thing is to distract. It worked. So you can see here that Shalaxi is moving towards me, which is fine, because that's the only thing I want to engage with at the moment, really. I don't want to face the whole army, I'll just choose to fight this one thing. So I'm not too concerned about that. I'm more concerned about just being behind on points and not having a clear way back, because I'm just going to stay away from Glutos for the whole game, hopefully, and try and shut down the ability to fly. So a bit of a spread out, but not enough for me to land anywhere juicy around there. So turn 2, for me, I go for Intimidate the Invaders, which is going to be a nice easy one. Bastian charges into the Blissbarb Archers. The Star Drake and Krondys were going to charge into Shalaxi, but only Star Drake actually made it, which was sad. And I did loads of shooting first and then did some wounds, but not enough to kill. Which is quite sad, because I was buffed up with Celestial Blades and Mystic Shield. Even though Krondys would be debuffed against this guy, I still would have been able to do something, hopefully. And I did shooting as well with my concussors that landed here. And I landed all my Tempestors up there. Now, the issue with this is, because I am forced to go first in round 3, I have to bring down all my Sky units. So losing that priority roll is actually a big deal. Because I now have to bring them down in unimportant places. And I choose to put them down up here, so that they're not going to get killed by Glutos, and so that they don't die via not being on the table yet. So they have to come down on an objective that's about to shut down. So these 2 objectives are both shutting off now, so I don't hold them. Which is very sad. I was hoping to kill Shalaxi and take that one, but alas. So I'm going to get my battle tactic this time, but overall it's just not going very well. And I think my strategy of avoidance isn't jiving very well with actually scoring points at the moment. So I only scored 2 points for the battle tactic. So it's not looking good. I finest hour the Stardrake that's locked in combat here, so I don't want it to die. And that is some kind of spell. That might be an arcane bolt. Temptation dice. You can see that the temptation dice are being used, and the depravity is now at 36, which I think is the maximum. So I've just been saying yes to every temptation dice just to not engage with that mechanic and just accept this is the state of the board. I don't really want to fight you too much anyway. I'm going to only look for very favourable fights, so I'm just going to accept the temptation to not take wounds and just deal with the consequences. What I would like to see, now I know it doesn't work the same way anymore, but what would have been nice for Slaanesh in this edition would be if you have temptation dice left over at the end of the turn, something bad happens to you. Slaanesh is mad that you're not trying to tempt the enemy enough. Maybe you take wounds on your heroes or something. That would be a pretty cool mechanic, I think. But that's not the case, because when you're building up depravity to the maximum, there's now no incentive to offer the temptation dice out. Because they're not being spent on summoning, because my opponent's grand strategy is to not summon anything. So Blutos is spreading onto this objective, and the Bliss Barbs are heading onto this one. Keeper of Secrets onto that one. And running away from Bastian. How cowardly. Running away from the Stardrake as well, onto the hill there. Yeah, we are playing these as hills in this game. So 5 points scored there, nice easy one for the enemy, and my opponent wins the priority and is able to go next again. So priority rolls are really not going in my favour at this event. So the battle tactic this round involves wounding the Stardrake with 3 different units from 3 different sources of wounds. So surrounding the Stardrake with different things and then shooting it. I do use all-out defense, but that's not enough to prevent wounds. And yet it dies. So everyone just shoots it to death. So yes, I'm definitely going to lose this game, but I'm going to keep the score respectable, and I'm going to try and kill some stuff now. I'm not even going to worry about scoring objectives now, particularly. I'm just going to try and murder things, because I'm definitely going to lose, and it's not like I'm going to win a trophy for finishing like 6th or whatever. I will look at my final standings at the end, because even if I lose this one, it's still 2 wins, a draw, and 2 losses, and the 2 losses will be against 2 players of the Australian Worlds team, and a draw against one of them as well, so that would be a pretty good result in my estimation. So, where are we? Yep, on to my turn 4. So yeah, it's only 4 points scored there because, let's see. Yeah, because some of these objectives have shut down. So my opponent does not hold more than me, I think, is the problem at the moment, because that one's shut off now. So, onto my turn 4, and I go for reprisal. So I have to kill this unit, which you might think is a bit tricky, but I think Krondys and Bastian can give it a go. So what I need to do is shoot this unit to death, so Bastian can charge them, because he's currently locked in combat with them. And once I've finished shooting them to death, I should hopefully have some shooting attacks left to shoot them. Other than that, I can put Krondys here, and then try and charge, and land on the other side of that unit and pile into them a bit, maybe. And he's got 3-inch attack range on his tail anyway, so maybe I can hit them that way. But it's going to be a bit of a tight squeeze, because I can't land within 3 inches of the enemy. So, after all the charging, well, I don't manage to shoot this unit off, by the way. There's 1 of them left after all my shooting, which is very disappointing. And, well, it is kind of a symptom of just allowing your opponent to have maximum depravity, because you're just giving everyone ward saves. I do get all my Dracoths into... This is... I think I've killed Shalaxi now, so this is the Keeper of Secrets, this one. Got everyone piled in there, and I didn't get my battle tactic though. So in turn 4 I scored nothing, for the record. So I was focusing on murdering things, and it didn't work out. Turn 5 I go for Led into the Maelstrom, so I'll be trying to charge in, and keeping them in combat. And I think I successfully did that. But then units start dying, the enemy starts spreading out, and then we're rushing through the end of the game there. and my opponent nearly scores the maximum, not quite, and I got a somewhat respectable score. So not too bad. And I think that's decent against an Australian Worlds player. Managed to keep some of my units alive. And some mistakes in there, obviously, but I think I'm happy with that. I think one thing that you could put down as a mistake is obviously just allowing the build-up of depravity, but that was a conscious choice on my part to just not turn down any temptation dice and just accept that that was the general state of play, that the maximum depravity was going to be achieved, and just play like that to simplify things and not worry about it too much. So that is the end of the tournament. 5 games, and I think they went pretty well, considering I haven't played Age of Sigmar for a few months now, and I think that was pretty good. So let me have a look at the final placings to see where I finished. Out of, let's see, 14 players, so I finished 6th. Yeah, so that was a good prediction. So I got 0 points in the first round, 10-10 draw in the second round, 11-9 win in the third round, despite pretty much tabling my opponent twice because of things coming back to life, and I only lost 1 model in the game, still only 11-9. And then 14-6 in the round against the Gits, which was a good game there. I felt like that one went very well. And then 15-5 loss in the final round, which I think is respectable. So, what's my view of playing against the top-notch players that are clearly in practice tournament mode, getting all their patterns down? It varies from player to player. So some of them seem quite relaxed, and maybe they're relaxed because these are games that don't really matter, so they can have a little bit of relaxation before the event. In the third round, or the final round actually, the third Australian opponent I played, he seemed very much like he already had everything mapped out at the start of the game, how it was going to go, and he did say to someone as well that he's played against a list like mine, like this kind of archetype, like a dozen times at least in the build-up to this, so knew exactly what to try and shut down and where to go and how to deal with my units. So I don't feel too bad about that then. He was playing very quick as well, so I think, would going through the motions be too harsh a comment? Maybe, because it's like you're playing this game that you feel like you're guaranteed to win, and it doesn't really matter because it's not at the Worlds yet. So you're just going through all your usual moves, just trying to blitz through it fast, and then you can get it over with, and then you can get onto the games that matter next week. I think that was the kind of vibe. So obviously very, very good player, and a very good list by my reckoning, based on my experience playing against it, and seems fully in the zone, ready to roll, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does very well at the Worlds based on that kind of mindset. The first opponent I played with the Skaven, I think that list is incredibly powerful as well. I was talking to some people about that list. The ability to get so many attacks and so much damage output out of some of the units, and the ability to pass off wounds to the clan rats from the vermin lords when the clan rats are 1,000,000 strong and they keep coming back to life as well, is very powerful. And from a Stormcast perspective, looking at that with our bodyguards, which are the Praetors, which are significantly worse and harder to use than the clan rats, and I hope they have a better role in 4th edition. That would be nice. So the first round, the player in that round I think is going to do well. He was obviously in full kill mode as well. He seemed a little bit more relaxed. I think very, very strong list though, and he actually finished first at the event, so again, wouldn't be surprised to see him do very well. The other player that I played against was the Sylvaneth player, and I think he said it wasn't his usual army, so he obviously is building up practice with it before the event, and I think he had one moment that was a little bit unlucky. I think he was hoping to just kill the Stardrake in turn 1 with the Kurnoth Hunters, but it's difficult because when the Stardrake has the Quicksilver, I don't know whether on average you should kill it, because it's got a decent chance of actually eating one of the Kurnoths before combat even begins, and then probably killing one more with its attacks, so you're probably going to be down to 4 to hit it with, and it's likely to roar you as well. So yeah, I don't know whether on average the Stardrake should die in that encounter. it feels like, to me, without mathsing it all out, it feels like the Stardrake should live. So that game felt quite good. The Sylvaneth list, I have had issues with that kind of list before, where they just hit you and bounce away. But I think because I've played against it quite a lot, and I knew which units to target, I think that helped me. So I think my opponent, if he's going to be playing at a high level with that list, I think he's probably going to hide the Seekers a bit more. I think he did say that to me as well, that he needs to hide them so that you can't just kill them, because I think they're very important for the list. Because when you bounce away, you want to get the models back in that unit afterwards. And even when you're stuck in combat, you want to get models back as well. So I think that ability is very strong, and I think they got killed way too early for his liking. Let's see, the Warhammer Orchard is about to take off. Yes, my thoughts on 4th edition will be coming as well. There might be another tournament coming up before the switchover, because there's a tournament in 2 weeks, which is a mixed doubles event. And if the army rules aren't available, then we'll have to go with 3rd edition for the event. If the army rules are available, then we'll try and play 4th edition, I think. But it's probably looking like 3rd at the moment, based on when the rules are due. So there might be one more to go, and then it's straight into 4th, just loads of Sigmar tournaments lined up, back to back to back to back. And I'll probably play some games as well at the club nights, and mixing it up with Old World, obviously. Got to keep up the Old World content that does significantly better than all the other game systems on this channel, viewer-wise. So I am the kind of person that plays a lot of different games at tournaments, though. And there's going to be a wide variety on this channel. It's going to be slightly more leaning towards Old World, just because it does the big numbers and people like watching that at the moment. The subscriber count is going up steadily, so that's really good for the channel. And I'll have some thoughts on Age of Sigmar 4th edition as I start playing that. Hopefully Bastian is competitive, that would be really nice. And thanks for people who've been watching this, commenting along, and those of you who've made it to the end. Don't forget to like the video, don't forget to subscribe if for some reason you haven't already. And if you want to keep the red hot, spicy, succulent, tender, moist, finger-licking good content flowing towards you over the next few years, why not pledge a portion of your life savings? Or maybe all your life savings, if you haven't got that much going on in your life. Yeah, just give me all your money on Patreon or PayPal, and then that'll pay for more tournament tickets and more models and more rule books for new editions, which are going to be required soon. So yes, pretty pleased with how that one went. It was a lot of fun playing Age of Sigmar again before the edition blows up. And all that remains to be said is, good night out there, whatever you are.